different topics that are relevant to Muslim societies, Muslim education, and others who are in the education and maybe curriculum, maybe people who are just interested in hearing new perspectives on teaching Arabic and methods in teaching Arabic. We have with us here our wonderful Dr. Noura, sorry, who will introduce the speakers, and she will be our moderator today. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, for attending, and for our wonderful panelists. Go ahead, please, Noha.
Thank you, Dr. Ilham. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Assalamu alaikum, sabah al-khair, marhaban. Welcome to this session, which I'm very excited about, on Arabic pedagogy, organized by, of course, the International Institutes of Islamic Thought's Fairfax Institute. My name is Noha Abul-Magd Forster, and I'm delighted to be the moderator for this wonderful event. I thank everybody in IIT that I've dealt with, Mr. Henry Alfin, Dr. Ilham Nasser, Mr. Khatib Aryan, and Ms. Adwa Ajay. Thank you so much. And thank you all for selecting this timely, very timely topic and very important topic for those of us who teach Arabic. And thank you, of course, for selecting these two wonderful speakers. I know their work, and I've met Ustad Alina before and sort of worked with her as well. So I think it's going to be a wonderful event. I just realized how widespread we all are. And I mean, I see people from Indonesia, from India, from England, people with concerns in Pakistan, Mauritius. And here we are sitting, all of us, panelists in the United States, from the very east to the very west and in the middle. So we have Ustad Alina way west in sunny California. We have the III team in the very east in Virginia. We have Dr. Ola in Texas in the south. And here I am sitting in Chicago in my office where I teach. I'm from Egypt, and I've been teaching Arabic here since 2002, and it's really a great privilege to be able to convey the Arabic language. And of course, we all know that we are maybe the most important conveyors of Arabic culture as well. So regardless of what level we teach, we're all involved in teaching language as well as culture as well as language. My role today is to introduce our wonderful speakers and to encourage you, our dear audience, to ask questions. We want to end this event today on a very robust, interactive note. So I'm going to keep encouraging you to come up with questions. I'll come back to how we do this. Our topic today is called Current Topics and Best Practices in Arabic Language Pedagogy. Therefore, we are here to hear our speakers discuss the best ways of teaching Arabic today. Yes, the way we teach Arabic has changed dramatically ever since it started being taught in the United States. Here I am sitting at the University of Chicago, where Arabic has been taught for more than 100 years. And believe it or not, when it was taught in Europe and in the United States, it was taught as a dead language, as a language of texts. Nobody was interested at all in learning how to speak the language, let alone the dialects of the language. And I leave it to our speakers to discuss how far we've come from that that approach of teaching Arabic. And by the way, this new approach is not just for Arabic, it's a new approach for all of the languages that are being taught today. Let's keep in mind that we're speaking today in the United States, and we're speaking also of the United States, because the approach I think that we will discuss today is not necessarily an international approach. You might find, and I have seen, different approaches in very big countries like China and Vietnam, South Korea, and Russia. So this is one approach, and the US is very much a pioneer in setting trends, but so far it's not yet a universal approach. Before I introduce our first speaker, I again want to please urge you to participate through asking questions. So let me just ask you to look at your screen. So, you know, I think many of you have already used the chat. So please as the speakers are speaking, if you think of a question, please write it in the chat. I will collect the questions and we will answer them at the end. There's another way also to ask a question. At the bottom of your screen, towards the middle, there's the letter Q and A. You can also write the question there, and I'll be looking at both screens. And the way, the sequence we will go is we will start with Ustada Lina, and then Ustada Ola, and then both of them together, and then we'll have questions and answers. Okay, so I think we're ready now to introduce Ustada Lina, who is our first speaker. Okay, so Ustada Lina Khulaki has a master's degree in human development and adult teaching from California. She's certified as an ACTFL oral proficiency interview tester, which is a very big achievement. She moved to teaching college level at Cal State Bernardino in 2000, where she taught between 2006 and 2011. And then she was appointed by the University of Southern California as the department coordinator and Arabic instructor from 2011 to 2015. She has a lot of experience teaching from all the way from preschool to 12th grade, as well as the university level. So she can answer a lot of questions about approaches for different age levels. And I will also, I will introduce our second speaker, Ustada Ola, when it's her turn to speak. So without further ado, Ustada Lina, please, اتفضلي.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nuha, for this beautiful introduction, and welcome everyone. Good morning. I hope that, I cannot share my screen again. Can you please allow me to share my screen if it's possible, Khatib? Allow us 1 second. I know how much technology is amazing, but sometimes it has some its own glitches. Thank you so much. And welcome everyone. My name is Lina, as you heard, Dr. Nuha, and this is my email if you would like to connect with me or ask any further question or for any needs. Well, now I'm going to touch upon the topic of student-centered. And as Dr. Nuha mentioned, that it's a new now strategy and methodology approach that we all, as a language teacher, it's not specific only for Arabic, it's for all languages, because it's proven the success and the engagement of students. And the student-centered principle that allows actually teachers and learners benefit from the environment that learners will be collaboratively working as partners in the learning process. Teachers also will make the instructional decision based on their student or learner's needs, age, interest, ability, and maybe their language level. Also, in this approach, the teacher creates all the time multiple opportunities for their students or learners to interact and engage in real life situation tasks using the target language, whatever language we are teaching. And especially today, we are talking about Arabic. So a teacher try to create multiple opportunities for learners to interact with teacher and themselves among their peers and their classmates, and also on a meaningful topic that it's real life situation. It's not a textbook. So what I'm going to talk about today, it's not something that you find in your textbooks. Unfortunately, all textbooks are based on the traditional actually teaching methodology, which is not anymore working with our new Z generation, that they are introduced, they are exposed to too many creative platforms, creative tools, and they are actively working and engaging with these tools. So we need to address their ability and their fast learning and engage them in the learning process. However, the student-centered approach will not happen right away, or you cannot step in the classroom and say, okay, today I'm going to do student-centered, here we go, let's do it. There is 4 different elements to it, and if you do it gradually, you will release your responsibility as a teacher to your learners to be able to be engaged. So the first step that you gradually release the responsibility is I do. And we all know as teachers and as Krashen constantly push towards comprehensible input, which is you have to always open your classroom, your instructional time with your whatever content you are going to teach or you want your learners to learn. So the first 5 to 10 minutes, you introduce the topic either by listening or by reading, depending on your student's level and your objective of the lesson. And that is, you are giving them the opportunity to comprehend and understand the topic. Meanwhile, this introduction has to be with a frequent check understanding. We cannot just give them the content and tell them, introduce vocabulary and structure without making sure that every step, every section we introduce, we need to check comprehension. And I will discuss at the end my last presentation, I will touch upon how do we check comprehension. So the first one is I do, a teacher, the instructor. Second one is we do, the teacher with the student themselves. The teacher will guide the learning experience and provide the support as the learners need. However, the learners collaboratively will work with the teacher, and that's usually happen with the guided task, with a guided activity. So teacher will make sure that will give the learners some activity and guide them through it by modeling, by helping them and having them encourage them to process and produce the language. The third step will be we do as learners. And these steps, it's all timed in a minute or 2. It's not the whole class. We do these steps thoroughly throughout the lesson or the instructional time. So we do together. So a teacher will give the learners an opportunity to interact among themselves, each other, and interact and use the target language and what they learn to apply it in a task, a real life situation task. So she will create a task, give them a prompt, and they will try to accomplish this task by working collaboratively. The teacher here is a very minimal responsibility. All what you need, a teacher needs to do to circle around while students are working in pairs or maybe in a smaller group, depending on the classroom size, and go around and check if the students are engaged, they are using the target language, if they need minimal help. The last step, which is very important, that is I do. You do it alone. So the teacher will identify student success from we do together, right? And create for them a task that they are able to do it themselves, search on the website, look for some content, look some information outside the textbook, outside the classroom, or maybe most of the time in the classroom, or maybe out, and then she will make sure that they are accomplished the meaningful task. That is meaning that a teacher will create a rubric and demonstrate to the student how they can do it, what is the rubric they need to follow, so they will be successfully accomplishing their task. So if we think about all these steps, think about how research shown that there is a peak time within 20 minutes that learners, any learners, even us as an adult, if you notice yourself, if you are attending a lecture, a webinar, whatever, the first 10 minutes is your peak time, your prime time. This is the time that you introduce to your student the content, the language, the vocabulary, the structure that you want them to function with and use it in their activity and the task. The middle, it will be a downtime. That is when you make it more peak time by having them work collaboratively. And then at the end, you always end your instructional time by going back to the beginning and close it. That's another peak time that learners will acquire, and the content they will receive, it becomes reside better with them. So you start with it and end with it. Oh, today we learned, we did 1, 2, 3, 4. And a lot of times, a lot of teachers will use exit ticket, which has a kind of an assessment. Maybe Dr. Ola will discuss the assessment part of it. So when we talk about this approach, it's actually what it does. It serves, teacher is a model for the student. She is not a one-person instructor that will go over everything. She models for the student. And then she will, the teacher, he or she, will give the student age-appropriate responsibility depending on their age, depending on their language level and their ability. Teacher always has to refer to the routine. You need to establish a routine in your classroom. So students are able to move from one area to the second, or from one activity to second smoothly and follow the procedure and routine. Always we, as teachers, we reinforce the positive behavior and encourage students to produce more language, and also takes time and appropriate action. When students are not meeting expectation, that is a minimum when we create a great and very clear routine and procedure. Also, having the student center, we need to think about how much we need to ensure that we as a teachers, instructors, we use the Arabic language 90%. We leave, they said, sometimes, I mean, there is some exaggeration, some organization refer to it, no, 99.9. However, they kept the 10% for case in any emergency, any time that you feel there is a need to right away to interfere, you can use the English language or the language that it's the mother language of your learners, because it's very important. We use, it should be also incorporate using variety of verbal and non-verbal strategies in your teaching to make the language comprehensible. So we talked about the first 10 minutes that the teacher instructor will give the vocabulary, the structure, the content, language content. This has to be incorporated with a different variety of a lot of visuals, a lot of strategies to check comprehension. Okay, and then deciding and facilitate activities that allows the student to understand, interpret, analyze, think about it. Also having them interact using authentic material. And I will talk and touch about authentic materials. It is very important to embedded. Language cannot be separated from culture, and authentic materials has many culture in it. In reading or maybe in listening to some conversation or some videos. Checking comprehension throughout the time, and also giving students sufficient time to process in the interpretive mode, which is the understanding, listening, or reading. So we'll give them, if it's listening, we give them time to play the segment several times, check comprehension, ask a question, play it. And if it's reading, you give them time, pair them or put them in a big group and time them for a longer time to be able to interpret the text, and also checking the comprehension throughout, or by providing some questions that they need to think about prior to the reading, or activate their knowledge of the content or the topic that they will be reading about. They will read the text or the content paragraph, and then there will be a follow-up question, making sure that they understood what they read, and that we should be having a sufficient time to do that. I love this illustration. I share it with my student throughout, I mean, all levels. If a student know there is a target for them in this learning process that they would like to reach, and me as a teacher would like to help them to move from one level to the next, I will share this and I will say, here is our path to proficiency. When we are going, and especially when we do some interaction and you notice that students are using only scattered vocabulary, I will mention that this is a novice level, guys. And when we use, and I think Dr. Ola, she will talk about the proficiency level. If I'm not mistaken, she will. So the novice level, it's only a list of vocabulary. So if your students are using this or they are at this level, I want to make sure to always create activity and opportunities that I will make my student and help them, help them go to the second level, which is novice mid. So they will use words in phrases, even if it's memorized phrases, a chunk of phrases that constantly I will use and create an opportunity for them to use it and interact and function with the language. Language that we give our student and introduce it to them in vocabulary and structure, it's not only to memorize, it's to use it in real life situation, to communicate with it. And once they communicate and function with the language, that is when they will acquire the language and enjoy the feeling of disposition, possessive meaning, that it means so much to them. They understand what they are saying. I will stop here. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any question, you just post it on the chat and Dr. Noha will go back and we will address all your questions. I appreciate your listening and I will stop here. Thank you so much. Your mic is muted, Dr.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you so much, Ustadha Lina. That was a wonderful introduction to some of the really important new trends and trends that are taken very seriously. And as you saw, dear audience, from Ustadha Lina, that the way Arabic pedagogy has changed is very much connected to research on how the human brain learns. So it's research-based. It's not just we're bored with the old way, so we will do this new thing. No, it's all really based on research. So thank you so much, Ustadha Lina, for that wonderful and very clear introduction to what we're talking about today. Now we will turn to our second wonderful speaker, Dr. Ola Shalchi. Ustadha Ola, of course, is again, like Ustadha Lina, a seasoned teacher of Arabic. She is currently an assistant professor of instruction and Arabic programs coordinator at the University of Texas at Austin. This is a very strong program at the University of Texas at Austin. She completed her doctoral degree in instructional design and technology here in the US from Old Dominion University. She's taught a variety of Arabic classes, including first, second, and third year Arabic, as well as Arabic literature in translation. Also, she's taught Iraqi dialect. And I think everybody in our audience knows that we have the classical Arabic or the modern standard, which is written. And then each country has its spoken variety or varieties of Arabic, which can be quite different. The Iraqi dialect, and Ustadha Lina's beautiful Syrian dialect. Those are beautiful dialects. I speak the Egyptian dialect. So we are representing three very interesting dialects today. And she also, Ustadha Ola, teaches also Arab culture. And I just have to mention that her MA degree is from my university, which is the American University in Cairo. So I feel like I know you very well, Ustadha Ola. Ahlan wa sahlan. And you and Ustadha Ola will be talking to us, Dr. Ola will be talking to us on the uniqueness of Arabic as a language. So, tfaddali, Ustadha.
Shukran Jazida, and thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And thank you and good morning for those of you who do have morning. Thank you all for being here today. I will be talking a little bit about the Arabic as a unique language, and then I will also be talking a little bit about teaching Arabic during the pandemic. And I will here sharing my slides with you all. Oh, here it is. All right. So again, my name is Ola Shalchi and my email address is here, ola@austin.utexas.edu. If anybody needs to get in contact with me at any point, ahlan wa sahlan. So I'll begin today with just speaking a little bit about, what makes Arabic unique. And just like Nuha was talking about, the different dialects of Arabic exist. Arabic is a diglossic language, and one of few languages that does have this diglossic situation, where we have different forms of Arabic, where we have the modern standard Arabic form, and we also have many different dialects. The modern standard Arabic form is the form that most often we see in written text. It is also the language of the news. It is the language that is used in formal speeches, whatever type of formal speeches those may be, religious or political, etc. It is also the language that children learn in schools. Dialects are what is spoken in everyday, it is what you would use in everyday speech. It is what native speakers grow up with. It is not until they reach school that then they begin to learn modern standard Arabic. There is, of course, a lot of overlap between the MSA and the various dialects. If we look at the dialects, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of various dialects across the Arab world. The more geographically located the areas are, then the more similar the dialects are. And of course, then the farther away the areas are located geographically, the more different the dialects will be. Dialects are also can have a lot of influence by other, can also be influenced by many other languages, including English, French, Spanish, Hindi, Persian, Turkish, Berber, and I'm sure many others. So if we look at here, you see this picture here, right? That just a simple question, ماذا تفعل? What are you doing? In different dialects, this only shows you here 4 different examples, but this could be asked in many other different ways as well. شندير بتعمل إيه؟ بتعمل شنو بتسوي؟ it's really just very, and then of course, ماذا تفعل, that is the equivalent in the modern standard. So asking, just a simple question can have many, many different variations. If we look at here, this map, this sort of shows one way of how we can categorize the different dialects, and the different colors here sort of represent the main dialect category. So we have, to the west, the Maghrebi dialect, which includes there all of the North African countries, most of the North African countries. You have the Egyptian dialect on its own, the Levantine in the green, the Iraqi dialect, and then the Gulf Arabic as well. So if we wanted to think about major dialect categories, this is one way that we could do that. Of course, within each region, you will have, like for example, the Maghrebi, you will not just have, there's not just one Maghrebi dialect, but many multiple Maghrebi dialects. Another thing that does make Arabic a unique language is the writing system, the way that our language is written, and it is written from right to left. It is only one of 12 languages that is written in this way. Here is a list of all of the other languages that also, have this specific characteristic. However, it is the most used of these 12 languages. It is also the 5th major language spoken in the world. And down below on the slide here, you can see, the percentages of the different languages spoken in the world, with English being the most spoken language at 16.5%, and then Arabic and French coming in both at 5%, and 5th place, with 3.6% of the world population speaking these languages. Something else that does make Arabic a unique language is, perhaps we should say, the lack of vowels in the language. So there are, vowels in the language, very limited vowels. We have 3 long vowels and 3 short vowels. And oftentimes the 3 short vowels, which are here, depicted, the fatha, the kasra, the dhamma, are often not written on text. And if you look over to the right, you'll see here this word, which consists of 3 consonants, the kaf, the ta, and the ba. And depending on where we put in the short vowels, this gives us 3 different words, right? So we could have kataba, he wrote, kutiba, it was written, or kutub, which is going to be books. So Arabic is very unique in this way. This is one of the things that a lot of new students, when they're first learning the language, find to be very difficult, but is something that they quickly also are able to overcome. If we compare English and Arabic, if we look at the beginnings of the words, here I gave you a list of just some words in English: everyone, door, class, big, small, outside, ice. We see that there's not really a pattern here with what a word can begin with. We see that some words are beginning with vowels, some words are beginning with consonants. If we take those same words and we look at the Arabic equivalents, kul, bab, saf, kabir, saghir, kharaj, thalj, right? And we look at what is highlighted in red, we do notice a pattern here. And the pattern is that the words all begin with a consonant. And that is one of the rules of the Arabic language, is that a word must begin with a consonant. Another thing that makes the Arabic language unique is the writing system. Not only do we write from right to left, but the rules for writing the various letters and where the letters appear in the word have very specific rules. We have sometimes up to 4 different shapes for the different letters. You have the letter when it is written in its isolated form. You then also have an initial when a word begins with that letter, what the letter looks like, what it looks like when it occurs in the middle of a word, and then finally what it looks like at the end of the word. With the Arabic language, independent letters do not form a word. And if you look down here on the left at the bottom screen, you see here a string of letters, alif, lam, jim, alif, mim, ayn, ta, marbuta. When I see those letters just written out as a string of letters, they do not equal the words when they do not equal the word al-jami'a, which is all connected. So words in their isolated letters in their isolated form really are just letters. That's it. They do not form anything else. In order for it to actually be a word, those need to be connected. The letters need to be connected, and the rules for writing the letters need to be followed. And so I'd like to now switch over and talk here about teaching Arabic during the pandemic. And I will be speaking about, what was happening here at the University of Texas primarily, and this occurred in many of the other universities as well in America. So it was in March of 2020, which seems like so very long ago now, that all of a sudden, really everyone, it was night and day, and everyone was asked to switch to teaching online. And one of the very first questions we needed to address would be, are we going to be doing this synchronously or asynchronously? Are we going to be having everybody logged in together and, having a live class, just similar to like this session right now? Or will this be asynchronous, where students will be completing things on their own and, submitting assignments and doing the required work, but not actually having any type of classroom or online, interaction. So that was the first question that we had to, address. We here at the University of Texas did a combination of both because the switch was very sudden. We had, some days set where we required all students to log into Zoom, and we would have class like that. And then we would have some days and some sessions where students would have assignments that they would need to complete online and get those submitted. One of the things that we do, one of the practices that we follow is having a flipped classroom. And the flipped classroom model is where, the teacher really has the students prepare for class outside of the classroom before they come to class. And when students come to class, then they are activating whatever it is that they've prepared. So, and we think of any type of work that can be done individually, and that is going to be done outside of the classroom. If that can include things such as reading a text, completing a fill in the blank exercise. Sometimes it is, watching a short video, and the homework assignments for those are, usually have some type of check for understanding component involved. When students then come into the class, they do some work with activating whatever it is that they have prepared. If they have read a text, they may discuss the text. They may do exercises, predicting what would come next in a text. If they complete a fill in the blank exercise, to help them with, for example, verb conjugations, when they come to class, then they will be doing some type of activity that requires verb conjugations, perhaps, giving a short presentation of what their daily activities look like. And so the instructor really does not lecture during class, and the instructor acts as a facilitator. And so we tried to figure out what would be the best way, the best format for our students to continue having this flipped classroom model, but to have that be done online. And we are fortunate enough that Zoom does allow us to have breakout rooms, and we use the breakout rooms very similarly to how we have our students do group work. We also, allow our students to collaborate most of the time when they are in class. And we had to think about what type of different assignments would allow for students to work together, and how could we allow for collaboration and allow for students, to let the instructor see what they were working on and allow the instructor to give feedback. And most of our students are very comfortable using Google and Google Docs. And we wanted to take something that the students are already familiar with and incorporate that into the classroom. And with Google Docs, it's very nice. Students are able to immediately log into a Google Doc. They can begin to type, and the instructor in real time is able to see their screen, see what it is that they are typing. They're able to also highlight. I sometimes highlight different things for students to focus on. I'm able to put in comments. So although I may not be able to be, in breakout, when students are separated into different breakout rooms, of course, you are only able to join one breakout room at a time. But if we look at the Google Doc, students could be in different rooms, and I could have my Google Doc open, and I can sort of be overlooking what the entire class is working on. When we did switch to online, and while we are teaching in the pandemic and still teaching in the pandemic now, we're trying to figure out ways to replicate the experience that students are having when the students are having in-person class, and trying to replicate that on Zoom. One of the things, and some of these things seem to be very basic, but you don't realize this until you're put into the situation all of a sudden, was, whenever we begin a class, we usually at the university level do not need to explain what is appropriate classroom behavior. Students know that when they come to class, the bell rings, it is time for class to start. They have their books out, they have their pens, their paper, they're ready to go. However, when we switch to Zoom and being in an online format, there was a lot of what we would say, maybe not appropriate behavior. And we created a Zoom etiquette sheet, which would allow for students to know what is appropriate to happen during Zoom meetings and what is inappropriate to happen during Zoom meetings. Another challenge that we had was, with the sudden change of being online, students were having Zoom fatigue, right? I mean, everything was happening online. It was not only classes, but all of the meetings. And, this was just with school. Students are also, on their different devices, speaking with their family members and their friends. And so all of a sudden this, this time that was spent just in front of the cameras and on the screens was really having an effect on the students. Submitting homework, we normally meet in person 5 days a week. Students hand in their paper, we grade it, just paper and pen, and all of a sudden we needed to figure out how are we going to do this all electronically. We were fortunate enough here that we were able to get our instructors iPads and an iPad pen or a stylus to be able to grade homework in that regard. We also, realized that switching to online, people needed to know that there were boundaries that needed to be set. Some students would assume that teachers were all of a sudden available 24 hours a day. I myself gave my students my cell phone number, and I let them know that they were welcome to text me. If they had questions, they could still, of course, contact me by email. But then I was also getting text messages from students in the middle of the night, sometimes at midnight, at 1 a.m. And so sometimes, you also have to set boundaries. When we did switch to the online system, many of our students, it was the beginning of our spring break, and a lot of students went home and were not expecting to stay home. So we all of a sudden had people in many different time zones. So that was another challenge that we faced. We use a learning management system, which is called Canvas. There are many different other learning management systems. Blackboard is another one, Glow, Moodle. And we've been using this prior to, the pandemic, but this is really what our, how we ended up setting everything up was done on our learning management system. And we quickly learned that we needed to be very clear. Students were not only taking Arabic, but taking other classes as well. Everybody had different rules, different expectations. And I just want to quickly show you here with the way that we have our learning management system currently set up. When a student logs in, this is what they would see. They would be able to click on these small arrows that are the side arrows right next to each of these. These are modules that are set up. We set up these modules week by week, so students know exactly which week to go into. They just see the date listed right there. Once they click on, for example, this week 11, November 1st to November 5th, when they click on that, the module will open up and students will see everything that they will need for that week. We have a schedule that goes week by week, so they will see the schedule there and they're able to click on this and the schedule will open up for them. Afterwards, you see it's split up day by day. And then underneath each day, you'll see the different assignments, what is going to be required of the students. Whenever they see the little here pen and paper, they know that this is an assignment that they will need to complete and submit online. And then whenever we see here this like little rocket, they know that that is a quiz, some type of assessment that they will be completing. So it allows them immediately to get a glimpse of what they will be doing for the week, and it's all spelled out, all labeled for them very clearly. And I believe that right now is where I will stop with speaking about, teaching Arabic right now in the pandemic. I don't know if before we go on to best practices, if you wanted to have any kind of.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Ola. Thank you so much for bringing us right into the world we were thrown in very suddenly. And I'm not sure how many in the audience are teaching, but if they are, then they can completely sympathize with this radical shift from being in the classroom to having to think, how do we best deal with this long distance teaching at whatever level. And I would say that from what I've heard, and certainly my university, languages. It seems that those of us who teach languages, whatever the language, Spanish, French, Russian, Arabic, Persian, we were able to deal with the challenges of virtual teaching, I think, very quickly. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Olad and Ustada Lina, it's because we've already, as you've described, the way that we've been teaching has been so visual, has been using so many materials. So it's not we've always been incorporating technology and media. And therefore, for us, the shift to the virtual imperative was not as uncomfortable as it might have been for some other modes of teaching. So I think there's this kind of meeting of the approach that you're talking about, this new approach of teaching language and this new world of virtual teaching. So we can maybe discuss that later. I do want to just say a few things about the questions.
I don't know if it's me
I
or
know that
Noha, your internet connection is not stable.
Some of our dear audience members would have preferred Arabic. Of course, we can only use one language.
Noha, Dr. Noha.
The reason we chose English is because most of the audience speaks English or understands English.
Noha.
However, I meant to say at the beginning that please feel free to ask your question in whatever language you're most comfortable with, as long as I know translated. But أهلا وسهلا بالجميع ونريد أن نستمع إلى الجميع ونعرف أفكاركم ومن فضلكم اطرحوا أسئلتكم لا تترددوا. Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, I just want to stress, please ask your question in Arabic if you're more comfortable in Arabic, okay? And please, I see them coming in, and I will gather them, but I think, yes. Can you hear me better now? Can you hear me better?
Sure, yeah.
You're
Yes?
cutting off. You're cutting
Okay.
off.
Can you hear me?
So I
Can
think
now, yeah.
if you turn off your
Yeah,
video, we can hear you better. Yes. But I can repeat what
I'm trying to turn the video off, but
yeah, you told the audience that they can
so
ask
nobody
in
now?
Arabic.
No. I'm trying to shut the video, but it's not.
It's off. It's off
so
now.
Ustad Salahuddin, thank you. Okay, great. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
Yes, it's better. Thank you. It's better.
Okay, Mumtaz. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Ilham. Yes, please, if you want to ask your questions in Arabic, marhaban, ahlan wa sahlan. So I think we'll go on while I collect the questions. We'll go on to the joint session between our two speakers, where Ustada Ola and Ustada Lina will now look at the question of the best practices. So they've talked about research and theory and virtual teaching, but at the end of the day, if you are a teacher, what do you think are the best practices according to the trends in the United States? So I will leave the floor now to both of our speakers. And I think Ustada Lina, tafaddali.
I think, Ola, you want to continue?
Sure, yes.
And then I will end with it.
Oh,
All right.
yes.
That's
Okay,
okay.
thank you.
I'm not able to share my screen again. If I could just get access for that. Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. Let me get back. Okay. So all right, so let's begin with some of the best practices of teaching. Really, this can be applied to اللغة العربية or, many other different languages. So one of the things that talk about really quickly is knowing the proficiency level of your students. When I first began as an educator to teach Arabic as a foreign language, we oftentimes in different faculty meetings with different colleagues hear about, are my students are at a novice level, or they're advanced, or I'm trying to get them to be advanced, or at what year are students intermediate proficiency reach the intermediate proficiency levels. And here in America, we have the American Councils of Teaching Foreign Languages, who's just done a great job really in defining and explaining what each of these proficiency levels are. And one of the things as an educator needs to be very familiar with are these different levels. I'm not sure why here on my slide, and I apologize, I can put it later on in the Q&A, or I'm sorry, in the chat, the link for ACTFL. They have on their website an explanation, a description of all of the different proficiency levels. And when you read the different proficiency levels, what a student should be able to achieve at a novice level, what the student can do at an intermediate level, at the advanced level, it really will help you have a better idea. It will let you know if the activity that you are planning for your students is appropriate for their level. Another thing that we, a lot of times, people who are teaching a foreign language, and not always, are native speakers. And sometimes we forget that our students are not native speakers. And the language that we need to use in the classroom is the language of the students and not our own language. About 75% of language comprehension comes from vocabulary. And so we want to be speaking, at least, just like Ustada Elina had previously said, at least using 90% of the time in Arabic in our language classes, or whatever language it is that you are speaking. If we look at here, this is, for example, just this nice depiction that shows, we have in Arabic so many different ways of expressing different emotions and everything, right? And here's this graphic that shows some of the different ways to express love. And a lot of times, many dialects, we tend to use حب, but for example, we also, and sometimes في العراق, we use would. And, just something as simple as that, knowing what our students know and keeping, kind of their dictionary in mind will help with their comprehension. So although the language is full of synonyms and antonyms, we do need to know what language our students know, what is their background, and use and recycle those same type of vocabulary words. I'm sorry, one second. I feel that, okay. Something else that it's, again, not showing here, but one other thing that we need to keep in mind is to keep our students motivated to learn a language. And some ways that we keep students motivated is by using different authentic texts, having students meet with a native speaker. There is an online platform, and it is something that students or educators would have to pay for, and it is called Talk Abroad. It allows for students to have a one-on-one session with a native speaker. Students are able to log into this. They're able to see which native speakers are available. They have, the native speakers have a little bit of a profile set up, so they can pick the native speaker that matches, for example, their interest. And they're also able to schedule a time to meet and to speak with them. Something else is to allow students to compare their culture with Arab culture. Here I wrote American culture because we are here talking about American students, but of course this can be substituted with any other type of culture. Something else that helps motivate students is to have them, students love, to learn about different foods in different regions, and to allow them to have a cooking class, or while we're still, on Zoom, a lot of us, or able to now do this, have a cooking demonstration done. Students are also able to participate in different holiday traditions or certain practices. All of these things incorporated with learning a language help keep students motivated and help them really get a better understanding of the Arab culture. This is an example that I wanted to just quickly share with you all. Here in America, oftentimes students will, at the university, hold different types of assemblies or gatherings, sometimes demonstrations. And many years ago, students had come together and they wanted to do sort of like a moment of silence for all of the lives that were lost in Iraq in the last war. And they didn't know how to depict this. And they wanted some type of a visual representation so that students walking across campus would see, these are the number of Iraqi lives that were lost in the war. And what they did was they asked for all these students at the university to donate old shoes. And there was a big open yard where all of the shoes were lined up, and the shoes were supposed to represent, I don't remember exactly, how many lives. And it looked, this is not an actual photo of that, but it looks something similar to this picture here. And immediately, the Arabs who were, on campus were very offended by this act. Because in Arab culture, shoes is not something, have a negative connotation associated with them, right? It is something that is dirty. It is something that you can use as a way, as a shatima, as a way to tell somebody off. And so it was inappropriate for those students to think about shoes and have those represent lives. But because the students lacked that cultural background, that cultural piece of information, they were unaware of, how this may be interpreted as offensive. And so incorporating culture is something that is very important, because their intentions were very pure. They had very good intentions, and that event quickly, turned into something that they did not intend it for it to intend to. I was speaking previously to proficiency levels. And here in America, many of our students at the university are interested in learning Arabic for their future employment purposes. And the Foreign Service Institute has set up, has done some research and has, said that in order for people to reach a professional working proficiency in the language, then they need to have a speaking or in reading in that proficiency at a level 3. And all of that information can be found online in more detail about what is a professional working proficiency, what is a level 3. But just to kind of have an idea, for native English speakers to reach this proficiency level, they would need approximately 88 weeks of education. They would need 2,200 hours of learning Arabic. And that is a very long time. And these languages that are listed here, with Arabic, of course, being one of them, are languages that native English speakers find exceptionally difficult. And so with the best practices, it really is a matter of, letting students know that it can be something that is achievable, but that they would need to continuously be working on it. And that, requires motivation. And one of the things that students motivates them, of course, is their ultimate goal. If that is, for example, getting a job that requires knowing Arabic, then that is what their ultimate goal is. But then they need to split that into smaller goals to help them achieve the ultimate goal, right? So you need small, realistic goals to get to. And educators need to think, and students as well need to think beyond just the classroom. What else is it that motivates people to continue to learn a language? Some people have personal reasons. Some people have their social motivation, right? Some people have would like to help in the community. Here in Austin, Texas, we have a lot of our students are very interested in helping refugees and people who have just come to America and do not have any English background. And they're able to go out and help them, even students who are just beginning in Arabic. Something else that helps with motivation, of course, rewards. And I believe, that learners at all different age levels, whether they're at the university or even K through 12, enjoy rewards, whether that is positive feedback, giving extra credit, having some type of point system where at the end of the week, they're able to get a prize or something like that. Motivation also allows students to gain confidence. And sometimes, we're able to plan certain types of field trips, and they could be something that is very simple, but it also gives them the confidence needed to go out and use the language. And an example of that is, planning a lunch or a dinner with the students where they go to a Middle Eastern restaurant and, they have to order their food in Arabic. It's very, there is not a lot of risk. It's something that they enjoy doing. And sometimes it requires just, sort of holding their hand and taking that step with them. Another thing to keep motivation high is not to stick to the same routine. Do not have students know exactly every single day what will be done. So you want to vary the material, you want to vary the routine, and not only stick with the textbook. You want to bring in different authentic texts and materials. And I will stop right here and then allow Ustadha Lina to continue with more best practices.
Thank you so much, Ala, for this wonderful. If I will be, if you don't mind, enable me to share my screen. Okay. Dr. Ilham, if I'll be able to
Yes,
share.
yes, yes. IT is doing that right now. Yes,
all right, great. Give it a second. And I'm so happy we have a lot of interactive and, many questions. So we will be addressing these questions the last 10 minutes. Yes. Thank you.
Lina, can you start and we will see why we're having an issue with the slides? Please can you just talk through it?
Okay, so I'm just gonna go back. As I mentioned, we start with instruction and we end with it. So I'm just gonna refresh what I started, how important is the teacher will use 90% of the target language, which is Arabic, تستخدمها, then create an opportunity for their student to be able to engage and interact in the language. Also make all the tasks meaningful and it's a real life situation. And then you're always going to check on their understanding throughout the lesson. And at the end, you are going to allow them to be immersed in the learning and function with the language using the target language.
So, Helena, sorry to interrupt. You're good now. You can share.
Right. So what we see here is kind of visual that you are going to work all these 4 steps together, and then you allow at the end student to use the strategy of either you vary, as Dr. Ola said, it's very important to vary our strategies. So we will keep the student engaged and motivated and excited in learning. There is a lot of simple strategies that you can use in checking comprehension, even at the novice level where students are really minimum with their language. Just thumb up, thumb down, identifying vocabulary that you introduce, or understanding, check up, thumb down. And then you are going to vary your also instructional approach by using different variation, from maybe younger puppet, from utilizing stories, utilizing visuals, utilizing authentic material, listening, video clips, etc. So I will share with you kind of a very simple okay. A second, so I don't want to do it for long. So if you can here, this is kind of a model of how can you introduce vocabulary and structure in a comprehensible way, where you engage your student and use more language than their language. So just to make sure that listening is very important, that we bombard them with listening. Learning Arabic language with Lena. اليوم سوف نقرأ قصة عن الأرنب الصغير، أرنب واسمه أرنوب. عنوان القصة: الأرنب الغضبان. الأرنب يأكل الخس والجزر كل يوم. الخس والجزر كل يوم: الاثنين، الثلاثاء، الأربعاء، الخميس، الجمعة، السبت والأحد. كل يوم يأكل الخس والجزر. الأرنب ليس سعيدا. ليس سعيدا. الأرنب ليس حزينا. حزين. ولكن الأرنب غضبان جدا. So if you notice that I used the props, I used some visuals. I used also, where am I? Why did I? So adapting to age appropriate. Maybe Dr. Ola, she talked more extensively for college student. I'm addressing more across grade level student, let's say from K to 8, using the authentic text. I used a story I didn't finish, so for the sake of the time. And the theme is always tied to the unit and the structure, vocabulary that I'm using, the lesson I'm teaching. It's always has to be comprehensible, even though you always raise the bar Research identified that when we introduce vocabulary and structure, it's not only vocabulary and only isolated words, because we need to encourage our student to tune in the language to the sound of the letter, sound of the word. Comprehensible input through listening comprehension is the most important point and skill that you need to enhance with for students and make sure that they are comfortable. So use a higher little bit. Although when I talked about, let's say, يأكل كل يوم, it's my teaching goal is to understand يوم وكل يوم, it's every day. However, I took it to a second level. I introduced the days of the week where they learned it scattered words, just singing it, but here I tied it to that context in itself. So let's say when we use visuals, we make sure that our students interact in a meaningful situation. So I will use these cards asking the student, do we travel to Egypt by airplane, by a plane, or by a car? So questions. So I give them a chance to say yes, by airplane, by a car. This is when we are learning about transportation. So I give it a chance to think about. It's not only I use the vocabulary of transportation as scattered words, they are meaningful to use. How do we travel? So I use that. Then I will take them to a video, short video. I won't play that. You might be able to find it. Of course, you find too many in YouTube. This is وسائل مواصلات بالعربي. So I introduce that project that play it to the student, so they will be able to see all the transportations. And I will ask them to list 6 or 7 of these transportation vehicles that they heard on the video, and then exchange it together. This is for all, as Dr. Ola mentioned, according to ACTFL proficiency guideline. This is for novice. If my student at a higher level where they can understand and be able to produce a language in a short sentence or some connected short sentences to make a paragraph, I will give them a task to think about, how can I travel to Jordan? Do I use the plane? Do I use a boat? Do I use a car? Do I use a train? So we will talk about activate their cognitive or their background knowledge and make it more meaningful to think about maybe a place that they would like to visit and how they can visit it. And then I will give the student, as we do, you do together, I'm sorry, this is the second step, third step. So with a classmate in a group of small group, you are going to talk about your colleague and ask them, use this question particle, and I'll hand out such a kind of a worksheet that I will have them go around in the classroom, ask everyone and talk about it together and jot it down and write it down. Find a person who traveled in an airplane in summer. Find a person who traveled in a car to San Francisco, depending on the place you are. So you choose the cities that they are more familiar with. All these kind of questions, at least they will ask 4 or 5 classmates, and then we will go back and we are going to exchange these findings. The beauty of this, that although you taught them maybe the first pronoun ana, and هو أو هي, then what you will find that you are creating a task, an opportunity for students to function with the language using this structure without making it so mechanical and just repeating it. أنا أكتب هو يكتب هي تكتب why. We are going to create an opportunity for them to utilize what they learn throughout by interacting. And this is more meaningful. So when they are going to report, they will use here, depending on the classmate, female or male. Then we will go to another step where is that they will be you by yourself doing it. So I will create a prompt or a situation task for them, covering a food unit, which is popular in all textbooks. And I will direct them to a website that has many a recipe of different food, although it has some list of ingredient. This is for maybe a novice. I will give them that, and I say choose which recipe that spoke to you or as a dish that you would like to make, and then list the ingredient. For a higher student, I will say look at the way that it's prepared and how it's prepared. It's written there, and then apply that. Either you videotape yourself making this dish and teaching us all, or maybe writing the recipe. So we will include it in a recipe book from all the students. And this is more authentic, and you are integrating technology. I don't want to take much long. If you have any questions, please address. And thank you so much for being with us and listening. I will stop here. So we're able to address.
Thank you. Shukran, Ustadha Lina. I wonder if everybody can hear me this time?
Yes.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. So we have 5 questions. And actually, one of them I think has already, Ustadha Nabila Al-Kibsi, I think her question has been answered. She was wondering how you implement a conversational session online, because conversation is so important. And Dr. Aula mentioned Talk Abroad, which is a great program for that. There's also another program called Natakallam, where students can speak with refugees, native speaker, Arabic native speakers who are displaced, and it's a great opportunity for culture as well. And Ustadha Lina has shown us some very concrete examples of how do you get students to speak in the class. So she just showed us how they interview each other. Ustadh Yunus Abrahamsi says, mention was made of new methodologies of teaching in China. Could you comment briefly and compare with the approach described here? Yeah, Asatidha, since I brought up China, I just will quickly say the reason I brought up China and Vietnam and South Korea and Russia and many other is that the approach that was discussed today, this proficiency approach, where we focus on students and get them to speak in the language in normal everyday contexts, is not the only approach, or it is not an approach that has filtered to other areas.
You lost you, Noha.
Noha, the sound is gone completely.
Are you able to address the question on the Chinese dialect question, or should we ask another one?
I don't know. I'm not able to address that.
Okay. So
I didn't understand. I mean, is it the approach?
Yeah.
In Chinese, Mandarin, they are using the same approach? I think the approach is universal. It's for all languages. It's proven to be successful and more meaningful to learners. So, I mean, as Mandarin, from my understanding with my colleague who teach Chinese or Mandarin, it actually has a lot of similarities in complexity and different dialects spoken in China. Like we have, as Dr. Ola addressed, that we use Fusha. However, there is plenty of other dialects spoken in Middle East. So
Yeah.
are we addressing this in our classroom? Which dialect? So I think in China, they have this also issue with the
Yeah.
dialects.
Maybe I'll take advantage. This is Ilham and ask a question here. Many of our teachers, the audience we have, I'm sure here with us, teach in international contexts that are not that similar to the context of the US. So you don't have the luxury of having 25 children. You don't have the luxury of having collaborative activities going on. You have maybe 50. I went to school with 45 other students. So how can we adapt some of the techniques, some of the practices you talked about in terms of the student-centered practices, and how can we adapt them to other contexts? If you have some advice on that. Either one of you. Thank you.
You want to go ahead, Dr. Ola?
Sure. Okay. So, I mean, one of the things, and I talked a little bit about this, and I said, that we do a flipped classroom. And I think that this model works, even when you have large groups of students, where, you have larger, whatever, if you have a class of 40 or 50 students, you have them into smaller groups working, collaborating on some type of assignment, speaking the language. And you set a time limit. Perhaps, they have 15 minutes to talk about whatever topic it is. At the end of that 15 minutes, then you allow, 3 or 4 different groups to, in front of everybody, present what it is that they spoke about. The next activity, another 10, 15 minutes, and then a different set of another group of students would be presenting, right? So it will not be all of the students presenting to the entire class, but a random sample. And the students won't necessarily know, like, okay, I'm going to be presenting first, I'm going to be presenting last. So that way they're always, kind of kept in line and they don't know what to expect. And maybe you have one group even present twice so that they know that, oh, you know what? Just because I presented, that doesn't mean that I'm done for the day. I might be called on again.
And maybe I will add something to what Dr. Ola said. What I do with my student, even if it's a bigger, I consult with a bigger, in other schools where they have 30 students and 35 in public school. So it is not something that it doesn't happen in US. It does exist. Also, there is another way to flip it around. It's not only flip grade or flip the classroom that they will be learning or going through the vocabulary and structure before they come to the classroom. Also with the presentation, I will ask them to videotape themselves. So you will have less time. And as Ala said, yes, we utilize technology throughout COVID. However, we still need to utilize the technology and our student on a specific platform so they can share these videos with each other on their platform. And I will ask the student to create, whoever the group, to create 3 to 4 questions to check comprehension, because you want to make sure that other classmates are benefiting from their group, the one who presented. So ask 3 to 4 questions to your colleague and have them answer that. So it's a beautiful way to engage them all. One of the questions that I want to address that I think Nuha, she was repeating, do we use MSA? Yes. In teaching 90%, we are the model. نحن نمثل اللغة العربية. If you are using dialect, you don't know what your students are really going to go through or want to learn at the after. Ala mentioned there is plenty of different interests with among our students. Not all of them they are learning Arabic to understand Quran. Some of them they are learning Arabic for pleasure. They want to go and visit a country, so that city or country that speak a different dialect, they will not be able to have it. I mean, we cannot address all dialect. So what we do, we use, because we want to create literate student generation. If we are going to speak the dialect, I am involved in Middle East and they have a dilemma that the student, even in Middle East, they are not able to read at a good level textbooks or stories because they on
That's
that.
actually another webinar on its own about our students in the Middle East.
So
I think our Ustada Nuha is back. I hope you can hear us and you can conclude this wonderful webinar. It's already time. So
Yes.
Nuha, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I hope you can hear me too. Thank you. It's been a delightful conversation. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. I'll just throw Ustad Yunus Abraham because actually he posed the first question and he wanted to know what the difference is between the methodology or approach in China and those other countries as compared with the proficiency approach which the speaker spoke to today. And I would say that because I have knowledge of the Chinese system and the Vietnamese system, it's actually simply the old way. It's the grammar translation way. So it's actually at a very different and maybe familiar to some of our speakers in countries like Bangladesh and India and Mauritius. They may still use those approaches. So I think we kind of end where we began. We've been talking in America, we've been talking about new trends and approaches in language teaching in America, but we need to remember that the world has not yet adopted this approach. But inshallah, maybe they will. And it's an approach that's good for the students that we are teaching, but you know, there are all kinds of students. There are adult students who may need a different approach as well. Thank you again to all the speakers and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you, Ustaza Nuha. Thank you, Dr. Aula. Thank you, Ustaza Lina, and everyone who joined us today. I hope you learned, I learned a lot, so I am sure, not just hope, that you learned something new about the approach, about the importance of centering our instruction on the students. And we will have this webinar under recording on our website, as well as on YouTube. And then please, if you're interested in the PowerPoint, you can ask both speakers to send the PowerPoint. That's their choice and their decision. Thank you so much, everyone. And it's a pleasure to have you with us. And have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Yeah, please, if you have any other more questions, communicate with us, communicate with IIT. We will address it. Sorry, but for the sake of the time and everyone taking off from their work to attend, so we were not able to address all the questions. We apologize for that. Please reach out to us and we would be more than happy to answer your question.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for hosting and having us in this webinar and introducing us to this nice, beautiful community you have.
Thank you.